Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm Gilles Gallant. I'm joined by Evan Abrams, and we're going to dive into all of the NFL wildcard weekend games, talk about what happened, look to the upcoming divisional matchups. Brandon Anderson, he's going to join us shortly for the hot read, looking at divisional round matchups. And then Patrick Everson from Vegas Insider will give us a market report on how sportsbooks in Vegas fared for wildcard weekend. But first, Evan, let's start with the most recent game. Let's go immediately to Eagles-Bucks. Bucks win big at home as 3-point home underdogs, but the total of 43.5 just stays under. They win 25-9. Now, Evan, I mean, first thing I see off of this game right off the hop, and we were talking about it here in the Action office here in New York City. This might be the best game quarter Baker Mayfield has ever played. I mean, 337 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, rush for a few first downs. But a lot of what we were seeing from this Eagles defense over the final 6 weeks of the season, it really started to show its head here in this game. They really showed that they kind of missed A.J. Brown as well in this matchup. The tackling by that defense was just atrocious. I mean, they benched cornerback James Bradbury for a few series at one point for their rookie, just because, they signed him in the offseason, so it was pretty bad. But, I mean, you could even argue, Evan, that the Bucs could have won by even more because of those first half drops you were seeing to Mike Evans, Cade Otton. I mean, his yardage was out of control. I mean, he had 2 drops in the first half. But my last point, Evan, really, I think from this game, what we saw was that the Eagles just could not stop the blitz, and the Bucs blitzed on pretty much about 70% of Jalen Hurts' dropbacks, and he just could not react quick enough. So I think at this point, I don't really know how much more we could say about the Eagles other than the warning signs were there.
Yeah, a lot to unpack, but I think starting with Philly, at least to close the book.
Yes.
Here were their defense points allowed in their last few games. So what did they end up allowing tonight? They ended up allowing 32. So 32, 27, 35, 25, 20, 33, 42, 34. The issue was the defense most of the season, at least at the end. They end on a 7-game ATS losing streak, which pretty unfathomable for a team to make the playoffs. They haven't covered a spread since November. So to see this team... To see this team try to win the game tonight, and assuming that was a possibility, felt like you were seeing something you haven't seen since they were 10-1. It just didn't make sense, especially when you looked at history, right? No team has finished the season 1-5 and won a playoff game since 2000. Been a long time. And even teams, right? Like Eagles started 10-1. What do they lose? 4 of their next 5. It's just not the same squad. Here's really a crazy trend that ended up coming to fruition this weekend. So playoff teams playing on the road, coming off a straight up loss in their last game, now 9-25 in the last 20 years. This weekend that was Miami, Cleveland, and Philly. So pretty crazy. I figured that was kind of worth sharing maybe for the future.
Yeah, and I mean the final 5 games for the Bucs too, just to transition over to Tampa Bay, who put up 32 points today. Again, Baker Mayfield, and we talk about Jordan Love here in a bit, really closing the season strong. Like over the final 5 games, and again, you can't say this about Baker Mayfield very often from a touchdown to interception ratio, 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and they were 5-1 pretty much to close the season. 3 touchdowns again today. Man, Darius Slay and James Bradbury were such an edge for the Eagles last year on defense, and they looked old. Like the whole defense for the Eagles just kind of looked old today. And I think from a Buccaneers standpoint, I'm not going to say that they're going to be able, because now they have to play the Detroit Lions, and they're going to go on the road to the Detroit Lions as about 6-point underdogs. That was the look ahead line that books were putting out there before. It's probably going to stay around there. It might even get up to 7, depending on if there's any injuries that we're not hearing about right now. I mean, but I will say this, Baker Mayfield, who came into the game, they were talking about how he was going to have to protect his ribs a little bit more, how he was dealing with an ankle injury. I mean, Toradol is a hell of a drug because he did not look like he was affected at all. And now playing the Lions, they played each other in week 6. Actually, they hosted the Lions. Now, the Lions won that game 20-6. And for a reference standpoint, as they were home underdogs in that game, 3.5 point home underdogs with the total of 43.5. I got to imagine this line will come down, but right now with the way that the Lions offenses looked and how I don't want to say they handled the Rams, but you got to think that this line may go up closer to 7, even despite the fact that the Bucs, how good they looked against this Eagles defense.
I mean, initial money in the market, and again, very, very early at this point, but it does seem like everyone's betting Detroit. All the tickets, all the money, open at 5.5. Now it's at 6. I kind of agree. I think at least you're going to see 6.5s probably by the morning when you're listening to this podcast would be our guess. And also kind of assume the total is going to go up. You're indoors. You just saw Tampa put up a bunch of points. I also hope Kate Otten over receptions and receiving yards might be on the radar. Even I even think tight ends on both sides probably have a decent day. But I do see kind of a fast track with this one. The fun angle coming off the weekend of games, though, is the concept that the Browns did lose. Baker advances. Ravens the 1 seed. Just a crappy situation, obviously, for the Browns, who had probably one of the best seasons for them in a long time, and see Baker have this performance and them kind of flame out with Flacco. But great performance from Baker, and kind of like Jordan Love, which we'll talk about in a second. He's covered 4 in a row as a dog, Baker. He's 7-1 in his last 8 as a dog. So getting 6, maybe 6.5, maybe 7. It's kind of interesting.
Well, and what's really interesting, too, about that matchup is how much the Lions rely on the run and how the Eagles today just could not run the ball at all. Vita Vea was just clogging up lanes. And even when they were trying to run, they were either getting attacked in the backfield the way that the Eagles were today. And that Lions pass rush, if Wirfs and that Bucs defensive line or offensive line is not protecting, Baker could get hit early. I mean, we were seeing Stafford get hit really hard late in the game because that offensive line was just wearing down as the game went on from an attrition standpoint. We're going to talk about Rams-Lions here in a second, but again, I took this one right on the chin. Cowboys fans took this right down the throat. Packers fans rejoiced heavily because the Packers, I have no other way of saying it, kicked the out of the Cowboys 48-32 in Jerry World. Total goes over a 51.5. Cowboys 7.5 point home favorites. Obviously do not cover, but one of the things I thought this was crazy is that that's the first home loss for Dallas since week 1 against the Buccaneers last year, where they lost 19-3. Dak broke his hand in that game. But yeah, there's no really other way to describe it, Evan. This was just a total kicking disaster. And I was in the middle of a bar where everybody was chanting the Cowboys. So I had to get out of there at halftime. And right after that Darnell Savage pick 6, I knew that game was over.
Yeah, for everyone who saw us out there, I was with Jill as well, and he did have to leave at halftime. It was, as a Cowboys fan, it's impossible, right? Like, you have the best season ever. You're won 16 consecutive home games, and it was 21-0 before maybe your first seltzer. So just a terrible situation. I think from Dallas's point of view, I'm not sure how you don't blow it up. At this point, McCarthy is still the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
3-1 and done, though.
Dak Prescott is still the quarterback in Dallas. I'm not really sure, other than that, what else you say about the team. 13-1 against the spread in the playoffs since '97. It feels almost impossible. They've lost their last 5 games against the spread at home in the playoffs. They haven't covered at home since 2010. And even think about it like this, right? Dak, 49-33-2 against the spread as a favorite in the regular season, 1-4 in the playoffs. It just kind of just doesn't make sense. So we've seen all the stats. We've seen everything out there. So I think we can forget Dallas for a second. But from Green Bay's point of view, playing in San Francisco, getting 10 points, it would just be the absolute ultimate for a first-year starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers to beat the Cowboys and the 49ers in back-to-back weeks in the playoffs, when obviously Favre and Rodgers couldn't do that for years. It would just be absolutely perfect chef's kiss. But that is what he is up against. What do you think about the matchup?
Well, for me, Evan, just before we talk about the Niners and Packers game, because I will
Sure.
say what's so poetic is watching Jordan Love, and we talked about this last week on the pod about how Aaron Rodgers watching from the sideline, 1 year removed, and now they're in the playoffs. And again, we've talked about the history of the Packers versus the Cowboys and how they have just kind of brutalized this team. But I thought what was wild about that matchup was how much the Packers exposed Dan Quinn and that Cowboys defense, who was up for a lot of jobs. And I imagine he'll still get some interviews. I think Seattle might want to be looking at it. But again, 41 points of offense at home, 450 combined rush and receiving yards. You just don't see that very often from that Cowboys defense, especially at home. I mean, Aaron Jones had a 3-touchdown game. That's his first 3-touchdown game when he had 3 touchdown receptions against the Lions like 2 years ago. Like he's just been in and out of the lineup and really hitting his peak at the right time. And again, Dak picks just completely swung the game early. But now from a matchup standpoint for Packers 49ers, I'm already starting to see the line come down for Niners 9.5 now. I mean, it might go back to 10. I mean, there's going to be a lot of jostling in the market on that line, I imagine, as we get closer to kickoff. But what's really interesting to me, though, too, Evan, is totals at 50.5. So they can't imagine that they think that the Niners are going to put up 50. Like they're probably thinking that right now, especially with the spread, that books and bettors and pros are starting to believe in this Packers offense. And now Jordan Love coming into this game over his last 9 games, 21 passing touchdowns, only 1 interception.
Wow, that's incredible. I was actually going to jump on that. So since week 11, he's second EPA per play, third in success rate, third in completion percentage. Weeks 1 through 10, he was 16th, 25th, and 38th. He's just an absolutely different quarterback. And to do that in his rookie year and make that type of transition, incredible. Just absolutely insane. I will say this. When you look at just an angle for looking at a team who won as an underdog and tries to do it again, it's actually not awful in terms of against the spread. So team wins by 6-point dog last week, 6-point dog again in the playoffs. Just 8-8 in the last 20 years. The issue is winning. The issue is winning 3-13. So an upset would be something, we haven't seen since the Ravens in 2013 to do that again, but to cover the number, especially if that gets, it's at 10 right now. So I think it's definitely possible, especially if he can run that offense like he did this week. But I agree. Quinn was an absolute disaster. You even saw it. They were passing all over them early and often. And then the Dak interceptions kind of made the game impossible. I just don't think it's going to be that easy against San Francisco. It just can't be. But I do think there's going to be success there, which is why, listen, total opened at 47.5. Quickly to 48.5, now sitting at 50.5, and 78% of tickets early on the over. Everyone's going to want the over in this game. It's the reason it's already ticked up.
Yeah, and I think they're taking that over because they're trusting in that Niners offense that always seems to come out fast. I mean, they led the league in first half scoring, so I can imagine that that's where a lot of the thinking is going for that. Before we move on to the next game, though, Evan, just think about this theory. I think Green Bay has got it figured out on how to cultivate a franchise quarterback. Because now, if you think back, they drafted Aaron Rodgers in the first round. They let him sit there on the bench for 3 years, just disgruntled the entire time. And if you recall back to that rookie year, I remember the first half of the year, he was kind of struggling, not really sure if it was like the heir apparent with Brett Favre after he went to the Jets. But now here we're seeing Aaron Rodgers. They draft Jordan Love, sit him on the bench for 3 years, let him learn from a legend. And now he comes in and most of his mannerisms throwing off the back foot, like a lot of that was straight up Aaron Rodgers poaching, like of the way that he plays the game. So again, kudos to the Packers. As a Cowboys fan, I completely did not expect that to happen. I mean, sure, maybe the Packers would win. Definitely not 27-7 at halftime, where I'm like, basically, all right, this game is a write-off. But now let's move to the Rams-Lions, which arguably was an even better storyline as far as the way that the outcome went and just the way that the game was played. But Lions win a thriller, 24-23 at home. First playoff win since 1992. Now the total was the highest of the week, 53.5. That total does go under, and the Lions do not cover as 3-point favorites. But yeah, this was like a wild back and forth game at the start because it looked like the Lions were just going to run away with it. And then you see Matt Stafford be able to connect with Puka Nacua, get Tutu Atwell for a touchdown as well. But man, this game really felt like it could have went either way until the fourth quarter. So I was watching the game with Simon Hunter in the second half, and the Rams are driving down the field and they're in field goal range. There's a holding call, and then they missed it on fourth down. Like it could have been a DPI, but it was close, But the point was that I felt like McVay, who we know as being this offensive genius, very conservative in the second half, especially with some of those field goals. Where they kicked a field goal, a 27-yard field goal with Brett Maher, and then a 29-yard field goal as well. And some of those timeout choices, I think, may have cost them in the long run here. And I asked Simon this, and he kind of agreed with me. We could talk about this from a future standpoint of the Rams, but if you're the Rams, I'm not discouraged by that result. I almost kind of wonder if we should run it back. Kyron Williams is fantastic. Puka Nacua, had the most receiving yards for a rookie ever in a playoff game. I feel like they're closer in the NFC than people realize. So before we talk about the Lions, what do you think about the Rams on that side, Evan?
Definitely don't need to do too much. I think you probably need to make the defense a tad better. And the thing that's crazy to me when you look at this game in general is you take a look at the box score. It's very, very even. To me, the only thing that stands out, which you kind of mentioned it yourself, a little bit of clock management from McVay's point of view, but also the red zone. One team 0-3, the other team 3 for 3. That's a difference. Like they just struggled in that area. They settled in certain ways, and it was the difference. It's a 1-point game, but I think the Rams played better. That's why when I look next week and I say about Tampa, if that line sneaks up and I have some confidence in the health on Tampa's side, Baker looked hobbled a little bit in certain ways, but I think he's fine. He looked, great today, obviously.
He might not feel good when the Toradol wears off.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see how the week goes. But I think the Rams played a better game, but it is what it is. I think that last drive where they settled to make it 1, they easily could have gotten 7 and multiple different passes a few times. So didn't happen. That's kind of the situation. But from Stafford's point of view, what an incredible season. 10-5-1 against the spread. It's his first time over 500 ATS since 2018. So he's just not a guy who usually covers numbers. Did it all year. So you really have to give it up there. So I'm very positive for the Rams moving forward, especially when you think about how negative most people were about them entering the season.
Absolutely.
Their win total was super low, and you had very few people who believed in the team. So I think entering next season, very different outcome. And then from Detroit's point of view, great game. They played well. They got the win. They made some good plays. I don't think they played fantastic, which leads me to believe, could they play better against Tampa next week? Possibly. I think the one thing to look out for from Tampa's point of view is check this out. Lions defense, last 4 games. Stafford went for 367, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Puka, 9 for 181. Before that, Mullins, 396, 2 touchdowns. JJ went for 12 and 192. Dak went for 345. Mullins went for 411 again. They've been absolutely torched lately. So winning, yes, but the defense, not so good. So Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, some overs, maybe some touchdowns, maybe a team total on Tampa's side. I just don't know how it's going to be much different unless they get a lot of pressure and really make it tough on Baker. But I still think Tampa stays in the game.
Well, and Baker has shown he will push it down the field. I think that was the big thing that we were always wondering, when he wasn't doing it in Carolina last year, he wasn't really doing it with the Rams that much last year, and now being established in this lineup. And one of the things about the Lions defense, and this is part of the reason why I was on Puka Nacua for a touchdown in that game, is the Lions defense has given up the 3rd most touchdowns to wide receivers this year, and they're 29th in DVOA versus the deep pass. That completely lines up for Mike Evans, to basically go over the top for many, or at least, I don't know how many yards he'll have, but today he could have had 150 receiving yards if it just wasn't for a couple of drops there. Cade Otton he could have went over 100 as well. So, and the Lions aren't exactly sharp against tight ends either. So I think Otton, like you had mentioned earlier, could also be in for a big game. But again, when you have guys like I'm blanking on the guy's name right now that Nick hit for the touchdown.
Trey Palmer.
Yeah. When you have guys like Trey Palmer coming in and scoring touchdowns like off a 50-yard catch and run, and Mike Evans is pretty much quiet. Even Chris Godwin got in for a garbage touchdown there at the end. You'd be shocked at actually how many weapons Tampa has, and that it'll be a very interesting matchup against the Lions where I don't think you're going to see a 20-6 game again. You're going to see more scoring from the Tampa Bay side.
Before we move on, though, I do have to pour one out for the over in the Lions game. It felt like maybe one of the toughest beats of the weekend. I haven't done like a full recap on everything yet, but man, when you go into the half 21-17 and you've got both offenses absolutely humming and the final score becomes 24-23, that is a tough one. If you look at the action app, the chart there, it was pretty legendary. And also, I'll say one more, Matt Mitchell, I believe, had the Lions team total over. Matt Mitchell, our audio producer, Lions team total over, Rams money line, losing both at 21-17 at the half feels almost impossible. So,
oh my God. Oh, poor Matt. Well, at least the Bills won, so that way he won't be too upset with the way that this weekend turned out. This podcast is proudly presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, now it's time for the hot read from our own Brandon Anderson. Brandon, what do you have us looking for at early divisional round lines?
All right, let's do a little division round hot read. Hot read is now 21-9-1 after that Rams cover for us, 70% on the season. And we are definitely coming in hot this week. Let's go with the Packers. Green Bay +10 at San Francisco. Now look, I know it's terrifying. The thing you want to do this round instinctively is bet on these rested one seeds, right? This could go very badly, very quickly for us. The Packers defense is not good, no matter what Dallas thinks. Joe Barry is not good. San Fran has all the weapons. It's entirely possible the Niners just drop 40 and we feel like idiots on this one. But what we saw in that Dallas game, that was not a fluke. And that was not just Dallas being Dallas. This is Green Bay being Green Bay too. Since week 9, the Packers are number 2 in the NFL offensively by DVOA, ahead of the Ravens, behind only these Niners. These are the 2 best offenses over the last half of the season. Green Bay's top 5 running, top 5 passing, and you saw why. Jordan Love has made the leap. Since that week 9 period, he went from second to last in the NFL in completion percentage over expectation to second in the NFL in that metric. He's top 3 in PFF grade during that span. He's top 3 in EPA in that window. He's basically put up MVP type numbers this back half of the season, and I think he can actually produce against the Niners. That secondary is beatable. Green Bay is number 2 in pass block win rate. I think they can hold up. And don't forget, Aaron Jones is running really well. 4 straight games now. He's at least 20 carries, over 100 yards. San Fran's run D is beatable too. So I do think the Packers offense can hang here. And don't forget too, the Niners have been a little slower defensively in the first half. They've been definitely worse at home, below average by DVOA versus number 2 on the road. Green Bay too, they don't make a lot of mistakes. They're a young team, but if you look at sacks and turnovers, Green Bay averaged this season 2.8 sacks and turnovers per game, lowest in the entire NFL. So they're not going to give this game away. And Matt LaFleur, I think, can get some advantages too. We saw what happened to Sean McVay this weekend. Kyle Shanahan similarly doesn't always optimize things. Matt LaFleur is better at being aggressive, finding those little tiny advantages. Niners might be a bit rusty here too. They haven't really played a real game since Christmas. Remember the Baltimore game we all watched? San Fran played Washington the next week. That's a preseason game. They sat week 18. They rested. So I don't know what happens if they come out a little rusty here, a little slow. They haven't really been tested a whole lot either. Right now, looks like rain and wind. That might introduce some randomness. That usually helps an underdog. And then the trends for this round. Matt LaFleur, you always want to back him as an underdog. 21-10 ATS, 68%. But in the division round, this is the key trend you need to know. Home favorites the last 2 decades, this round, only 42% against the spread. Just the 1 seeds, who remember, are rested. They didn't play last week. 1 seeds in the divisional round are 35% ATS this round, including when they're favored by 10 or less, 10, 25, and 1 against the spread. 29% cover rate. If you look just these last 2 decades, both 1 seeds covered only 2 times in 2 decades. Meanwhile, they both failed to cover 8 times in that span. So if you look kind of at how the numbers play out, those 1 seeds are failing to cover by over 2 points a game. So you're basically paying a 2-point tax if you want to bet on the 49ers here or on the Ravens as well in their game. So the value is on the Packers. Divisional round home teams on a 1-game losing streak. Don't forget the Niners lost week 18. Again, that's implying some rust here. Those teams are 3-15 ATS the following game, 17% cover rate. And road division round teams that missed the playoffs last year, those teams are 27-13 ATS, 68%. Teams like the Packers that are maybe on the up and coming and just won a playoff game to get to this round, but now are on the road. So I love Green Bay here. I didn't bet Green Bay last week, but I had this matchup marked if they did survive. Give me Packers plus 10 all day. I want that key number, but we're not done yet. Instead of a second hot read tonight, how about a little escalator on the Packers? Divisional round underdogs of 7 to 11 points are 12-23 straight up. If you just bet the money line on all those teams, you would have a 52% ROI over the last couple decades. 52%. That is huge. Sprinkle that Packers money line plus 380, but we're not done yet. Take it a step further. If Green Bay wins, Dallas is out, San Francisco is out. What's left? We already saw Green Bay win in Detroit on Thanksgiving, and I honestly think the Packers will be favored if Detroit loses their next game. So, got to play the escalator. Plus 1,100 for the Packers to win the NFC. Why not? Forget that they're a 7 seed. Jordan Love is the best quarterback left in the conference. How often do you get to bet on the best quarterback left at plus 1,100? And if you're doing that, we got to do it 30-1 to win the Super Bowl, even if it's just a ticket to hedge out once they get there. Obviously, they'd be big underdogs then. If you're playing the 11-1, you got to play the 30-1 too. Coming in hot, I warned you. Green Bay Packers, hot read this week, plus 10 in San Francisco. I think they can hang. I think they have a chance to win. History says the value is on the underdog, especially against these 1 seeds. So, divisional round hot read, Green Bay Packers plus 10, and ride that Packers escalator. Let's have some fun.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, Evan, now let's turn to the AFC and let's go right to Steelers-Bills, which was supposed to be played early Sunday, but weather in Buffalo, volunteers having to shovel. I mean, it was a big mess. There was even talk about this game potentially being moved either to Tuesday or that potentially they may even move the game all the way to Cleveland as a result. Well, the game did end up getting played today, and it pretty much went, I think, how a lot of people thought it was going to go because the Bills were 10-point favorites. And they win 31-17, and the 38.5, which was a luck over by Nick Giffen, it does go over for a 31-17 score. But now, before I say that the Bills did what they were supposed to do, I thought the Steelers played pretty well. Like, played as close as possible based on what they had with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, because this game to me felt like it really came down to 3 plays. You had the interception by Rudolph into the end zone to Deontay Johnson that I thought was going to be a touchdown that might have got the game a little bit closer. Then you've got the Josh Allen 50-yard touchdown run where he's about to do the fake slide. And then, I mean, again, the play in real time was beautiful. Mind you, I had under 38.5 rushing yards. So it was beautiful, but also bittersweet at the same time. But then the roughing the passer call when he slid. I'm not saying that it wasn't a penalty, but just we see quarterbacks do this all the time where they get hit a little bit late and then they don't get I feel like that's such a subjective call, and there's so many quarterbacks that do it that either don't get the call or they do it and they do get anyway. I just felt like that was such a momentum shifter. And as well, I feel like the Bills got a pretty favorable whistle overall. I mean, they were only penalized once the entire game. But that the Steelers' linebacker talent, or the lack of, was pretty apparent. Like, for example, Dalton Kincaid caught a touch, like, it was making catches, and Miles Jack was defending him. And you do not want Miles Jack defending a tight end like Dalton Kincaid or Dawson Knox. And then they lost Joey Porter Jr. to concussion as well.
Yeah.
Not that that really made a huge impact, but again, he was keeping Stephon Diggs pretty much in check. But, I mean, Josh Allen, dude, this run for him, it's not going to be part of an MVP campaign by any stretch, but 3 passing touchdowns, and most importantly, no interceptions.
Yeah, from Pittsburgh's point of view, this felt like the game we kind of thought was possible, right? They look like they're about to get blown out. They look like the cover's never possible. And then all of a sudden they're covering, and we're like, oh my God, Bills are going to blow this game, right? It's within 7. Things are looking a little shaky on offense, and then Buffalo wins by double digits and Pittsburgh doesn't cover, and now it's another double-digit win for Josh Allen. Just the box score is a little odd, especially if you watch the game, because it felt like it could have gone both ways multiple times. Very roles and scripts from both these teams, which we've seen for a while, which is going to be interesting for Buffalo next week, but we can wait a second there. Listen, no TJ Watt just kind of stinks. Pittsburgh's a different team. Yeah, Pittsburgh's a different team. Lack of pressure, just all over the field. It feels like they're a little bit different. 1-11 straight up, 4-7-1 against the spread without Watt. The Steelers, just on paper and off paper, it kind of shows up. It's also worth noting here: double-digit dogs, 4-12 ATS in the playoffs since 2011. Double-digit dogs in the wild card round, 2-8 ATS last 20 years. These teams usually don't cover. And Pittsburgh, again, walking in with a negative point differential. This was a tough battle. The only thing that was kind of going in their way, or going in their favor, I guess you should say, was turnovers from Buffalo, and Buffalo kind of, regressing to the mean a tad, and that just didn't happen. They didn't turn over the ball, and if Buffalo's not going to turn it over, they ain't going to lose.
I love that you just said that, because I legit have this line written down. I said, opponents almost count on the Bills' turnovers to stay in the game. And if they don't turn it over, they are extremely tough to beat. So go.
How about this one? So with no turnovers, I looked it up because I was very curious. So Josh Allen, 13-18-2 ATS after a 0 turnover game. 4-10-1 ATS last 3 seasons. That is the worst of 80 quarterbacks in the NFL. So we're going to see if he can have no turnovers again against the Chiefs next week, which, different story. But I figured I'd toss it in there.
No, I appreciate that. Now, before we talk Chiefs Bills, I just wanted to mention one trend, because Dawson Knox, for me, is somebody that I used to bet on touchdown scores like all the time. And he basically is like an extended part of my family at this point with how much money he has made me over the years. Well, here's a fun trend for you, Evan. Dawson Knox has scored in each of the last 4 wildcard games. Not only did he score in each of the last 4 wildcard games, first touchdown of the game. So something just to consider here, because this is his 5th year in the league. He didn't score the wild card. They didn't play in the playoffs in his rookie year, but every wild card game, he is on point. And he only had 1 catch, I believe, today too. So again, he wasn't really very much involved in the offense outside of being a red zone threat, which he has been pretty much his entire career. But now let's talk about that matchup that we have seen routinely in the regular season and then epic playoff battles. That is Chiefs, Bills. But now, instead of being played at Arrowhead, we're going to be back in Buffalo now. This is the first time Patrick Mahomes will be in a road playoff game. That's obviously not the Super Bowl. And Josh Allen and the Bills, I mean, they're 3-1 straight up in the last 4 regular season games versus the Chiefs. So right now, sitting about 3-point favorites with an over-under of 45.
Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning the market a little bit right now. 58% of tickets on Buffalo, 75% of the money on Buffalo, about 6,000 to 10,000 tickets, early situation, but that's what's happening at the moment. You got a bunch of money on the over in that game at 46.5. So 7th meeting between these two quarterbacks, 3-3 straight up, 3-3 against the spread. Mahomes has played 5 straight times at home against Allen. He played against him on the road just once in their first meeting. The funny thing about that road Mahomes playoff is also the fact he did face the Bucs in Tampa in the Super Bowl. So
right. So that was a true road game for him.
yeah,
No joke.
it could be, and they got crushed, but that was for a different reason, which is just a fun stat. But either way, this is the battle. This is what everyone wants. And the thing that makes it fun, not only is it in Buffalo, but Buffalo's won 6 in a row. Buffalo looks great. Buffalo offense against Kansas City's defense feels like the matchup we're kind of all waiting for, at least from my point of view.
And one of those 6 wins against the Chiefs too, right? Like, so
Yeah.
that's the other thing for me is that they know this team inside and out. And you know, they won 20-17, fairly close game. Again, Josh Allen was running all over the place in that game too. But that was the type of game where both quarterbacks they both had an interception in that game. It feels like a lifetime ago at this point of when they played, just as far as how much things have progressed. But the one thing that I found really interesting, Evan, is, and we talk about this a lot, is about the Chiefs and Mahomes when they're either underdogs or that magic number of favorites of maybe like 2.5 or less. Against the spread historically in Mahomes' career, this has been a money printer. And when we were in the action office today, because we were all just watching this line come out and watching the hypothetical line, it was bouncing between 2.5 and 3 pretty much the entire second half. And I knew a lot of people here were locking in that 3, feeling very confident about it because of that trend.
1-1 against the spread, 7-3 straight up. Mahomes is an underdog. You're going to see it all week. It's going to be plastered everywhere. I personally don't care. I like Buffalo. I'm going to like Buffalo in the game. I think they're a better team. I haven't liked Kansas City all season. Their defense scares me. Their offense isn't, which says something about the perception of the team in general. So I like Buffalo. I'm probably going to want the money line and want absolutely nothing to do with this. I also kind of assume you're going to get Buffalo at plus money at some point in this game because it's Mahomes on the other side. And anytime that man scores a touchdown, they're probably going to move it a little bit too much. So that's just a guess, and that's where my thought goes. The other fun one and the other possibility in this game, because of how close it is the fact that Josh Allen's 0-6 in overtime. So if it gets there, that's going to be the storyline. It's what everyone's going to talk about. So we'll see.
Well, and over the last 6 games, the Bills have really shifted their focus with the new offensive coordinator since they fired Ken Dorsey of being more of a running focused team. And the Chiefs, I mean, we're going to talk about this Dolphins game in a second, but the Chiefs ranked 26th in DVOA versus the run, but their pass defense has really been what's been carrying them because they're top 5 in defensive DVOA versus the pass. They don't give up a ton of touchdowns as well. But again, Josh Allen is not these tomato cans that they're facing a lot of the time. And then, like, speaking of a tomato can, like the Dolphins, let's talk about that game now. Dolphins Chiefs. Chiefs win 26-7. It felt like the most no doubt win of the weekend. Total goes under at 43.5, and the Chiefs is 4.5 point favorites, cover very easily. Now, Evan, obviously, I mean, you're a person who covers the trends and the narratives and everything that comes attached to it. Probably the most overused narrative storyline of the week was Tua Tagovailoa and his performances in cold weather. And honestly, that's probably all you needed to hear because, again, 1 passing touchdown, 199 pass yards. Like, he had an over-underline of passing yards of 210. Normally, that's around like 280, entering a game. But because of that cold weather and obviously the Chiefs' secondary, they had that down to 210. And even in garbage time, like, we're all at the bar in New Jersey, nobody was worried about it going over. And Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice, they pretty much did whatever they wanted on that defense, who could not really generate a pass rush. One of the fun bets that we were doing at the bar that we were announcing to everybody is we were taking Dolphins for no sacks because of losing Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. And of course, no sacks happened in the game. That was paying around plus 700. Now, Evan, I know you had just said that like you don't care about where the Chiefs are from the ATS and spread standpoint, but like, I'm not sure, like, you're going to hear probably a lot this week about how the Chiefs, they're a sleeping giant. Watch out for the Chiefs. But I feel like I didn't really take much away from that game. I feel like that was more of an indictment on the Dolphins than giving the Chiefs a bump up and doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, I kind of agree. All season, we've seen KC's defense step up in multiple ways and different games and different situations, and they've been the anchor of the squad. So I don't really see how that changed too much with this one. I mean, considering this, second half unders in Chiefs game, 16-2. Fourth quarter unders, 17-1. It's insane what they've done, especially at the end of games, to clamp down teams.
Park the bus.
Yeah, that's a really, really good way to put it. And when I bet every team in the wild card round to score a touchdown this weekend, I didn't think the Dolphins were going to be the biggest sweat, which it was. They looked terrible. They couldn't move the ball downfield. So I think they have their own problems here, right? Like this season, they played 4 road games versus above 500 teams. They went 0-4. They failed to cover the spread by 21 points per game. They scored 15.8 points per game in those 4 games. They've got problems against good teams. They've got problems outdoors. It's a bit of a different situation. To me, it's a situation for next season. I don't have too much else to say there because I think Tua is going to be the quarterback, and I think they're going to bring back mostly the same team because there was also a lot of injuries.
A ton.
A ton. So I think they're going to believe that if they ran it back, the end of the season might have looked a little different. I don't know if that's the truth, but they're going to probably run it back. So that's Miami. To me, that's the situation. I don't need to go into it too much more. From Kansas City's point of view, the defense looked just as good as they've looked all season. I don't think anything like that changed. And now they're going to face a team who doesn't care what the temperature is outside. I mean, they played a game today and, minus 10 wind chill. Doesn't matter to there. I think it's the team that is probably the closest to them in terms of talent. And it's probably the best matchup, which is the reason I think Buffalo hopefully getting Gabe Davis back as well, getting a little bit healthier on offense, a few more weapons is going to be a little bit much for Kansas City, but it's a perfect matchup. It really is. And consider this, right? When the Chiefs defense allows more than 20 points this season, they're 0-4. When they're not, they're 12-2. I don't know if it's a
Justin Fields trend.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more complex than that.
Good. Because to me, that's amazing. I didn't know about the 20-point part. I should have went back and looked through the game logs to see that. That's amazing. Good find by you. And now a quick word from our sponsor, HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. And are you too sad from betting wildcard weekend underdogs to leave your house? No problem. With HelloFresh, you skip trips to the grocery store, and unlike betting unders, they make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why they're America's #1 meal kit. This time of year, everyone's looking to revamp their eating habits. Look to HelloFresh's wholesome options every week, like their Protein Smart recipes each week. People say a lot of things, but we know 2 things are always true. First is you can't rely on the passing game in windy conditions. Second, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and HelloFresh agrees with both of these. In fact, they're giving all subscribers free breakfast for life. That means you'll enjoy a totally free breakfast item with every single HelloFresh delivery. So go to HelloFresh.com/ActionPodFree and use ActionPodFree for free breakfast for life. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/ActionPodFree with code ActionPodFree. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. All right, now another game that was, let's round this out. Let's talk Browns-Texans now because Texans 45-14 over the Browns. They were home underdogs as 2.5-point underdogs to the Cleveland Browns. And the 44.5 total, they pretty much went over that by themselves. And now Stroud, 6-2 against the spread as an underdog now in his career. But honestly, Evan, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say the Flacco dream or the Joe Flacco dream. It just died a pretty quick death in the second half. Multiple pick sixes. I'm annoyed that people were not handicapping for that idea based on what we saw in the regular season when he had 8 interceptions in 5 games. And also another thing that really shocked me is how we talk about how hyped up certain units are. And like, for example, the Browns defense, like they were top 5 in defensive DVOA, both against the run, against the pass, against tight ends, like you name it, they were top 5 against that position. And they had no answers for CJ Stroud. 274 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, pretty much a perfect passer rating, no sacks. Honestly, dude, like if Stroud and the offense are cooking like that, I'm not even sure the Ravens are going to be able to stop them when they eventually play next week.
It looked like this weekend CJ Stroud and Jordan Love just didn't care. They went out there
Playing with house money.
Yeah, we're flinging it around. And it felt that way early against Cleveland, who looked like a team who'd been through 5 quarterbacks. Flacco
Caught up to them.
Yeah, here's the crazy one, right? So 49 quarterbacks this year had over 100 plays. Here's Cleveland's quarterback's EPA per play finish. PJ Walker was 47th, DTR was 46th, Deshaun was 30th, Flacco was 29th. You need a better year with that type of defense. That's number one off the bat. Also, you lost Nick Chubb in like week 2, and this was the season you got. Congratulations. Run it back, figure out some things. You're probably going to be better for it. The one issue, holy mackerel, that defense was terrible on the road. And that's a thing I just can't figure out. They end the year allowing 31.3 points per game on the road and 13.9 points per game at home. Here are the road points allowed: 45, 31, 22, 36, 29, 31, 38. It feels almost impossible. And even think of it like this: road overs for them, 9-0, 10-0 dating back to last year. First half road overs also 9-0. Something is off. Something was weird, but it's worth noting because it's just so different. I can't explain it.
Yeah, and it's easy to say this after the fact, but I feel like one of the big road red flag games that we talked about, remember way back when they played the Colts and that Minshew Mania ridiculous game? He's rushing for 2 touchdowns, and that was one of those wild back and forth games. And I was trying to think to myself, do I attribute that more to Minshew and just the erratic, random plays that seem to happen when he's in a football game?
He beat Baltimore, didn't he?
Baltimore, yeah. Oh,
crazy.
Yeah. So now the Texans are going to be going on the road to play Baltimore. They're going to be playing Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. The Ravens open up as 8.5-point favorites with a total of 46. And again, if Stroud is doing that against the Browns defense. Now, the one thing I will say as a caveat here, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, they have put on some beatdowns at home this year. If you go through it, like the Lions and Seahawks, when they rolled through, just beat the hell. Really, there's really one team that was able to kind of put a number on them, and it was Cleveland and Deshaun Watson and them. In one game this year, where really their defense looked like it got quote unquote exposed. But that was about it. And I almost kind of downgrade that a little bit because it's a divisional matchup. But right now, looking at this game, I really love the Texans here at 8.5.
Yeah, I would also say the Rams played the Ravens decently well recently.
Should have won that game too.
Probably should have won that game. So from Baltimore's point of view, I think the stat that everyone's going to try to point to is Lamar stinks when he's on like tons of rest. He just kind of does. He's 5-2 straight up, but doesn't cover the number, which really does matter this week because they're laying a lot of points, because that's up to 8.5 now, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it at 9. He's 1-6 ATS on 12 plus days rest, which is basically a bye, and that's not counting week 1. So we're talking in season, and he's 0-6 ATS as a favorite in that spot. So this is something he hasn't done. Even as a favorite of over a touchdown, he's 11-15 ATS. It's just not great, but Baltimore has looked absolutely ridiculous, completely dominant in every way, shape, form, or fashion. Now they're adding Dalvin Cook, which I hope they don't give him a ton of carries and do something dumb.
Yeah.
And you get Mark Andrews back. So you're going to add Andrews to an offense where Isaiah Likely has looked absolutely fantastic. It feels like Baltimore is in a perfect situation, but CJ Stroud just doesn't look like he cares, and it looks like he's going to, probably put up a decent amount of points on this team, and the pressure to me is going to be on Lamar. So interesting nonetheless. From the Texans' point of view, though, I think you feel like you have to talk about the ticket, right? Season 200-1 entered the year. So they're the first team since the 81 Giants, 200-1 or higher, to advance to the divisional round. So haven't seen this ticket in a long time.
And the other thing I was going to bring up too is these two teams, they met in week 1. CJ Stroud's first start in the NFL. They lose 25-9. Lamar runs for pretty much like 2 touchdowns in that game. But I wanted to bring that up to not just to tell bettors, maybe don't weigh that result too much, because it probably took about 2-3 weeks before Stroud started to look a little comfortable. And that's when the Texans and that offense started just taking off. But yeah, the 25-9 result, that was just one of those games where it was interesting because they gave up 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. But by the end of the year, the Texans were second in DVOA versus the run, and they were one of the better teams defending the run. But part of the thing is that they're really good at defending the run between the 20s. Once they get into the red zone, they gave up 19 touchdowns to running or on the ground this year, which again, I brought that up because that's the way that I was looking at it when they played the Browns, and you saw it. And again, there's no way that, even though I had Kareem Hunt for an anytime touchdown, there is no way that I would have walked away thinking to myself, yeah, Kareem Hunt is going to be the only guy who scores a touchdown today for the Browns. So very interesting. I imagine this line is going to move maybe down to 8. I'm interested to see what's the early ticket action right now between Ravens and Texans.
Honestly, so the spread's up to 9.5 right now for Ravens Texans. 9.5. And I don't think this is very shocking, but right now, Texans, 72% of the tickets. It would be, 72% of the tickets. Right now, the Lions would be the biggest public side right now. They're at 78% against the Bucs in early action, but 72% on the Texans. And Green Bay's got 73% as well. So everybody is absolutely jumping on the dogs. So maybe you'll get 2 double-digit dogs on Saturday trying to pull upsets, which should be fun.
All right. Do you have anything more to add, Evan, before we wrap it up?
No, just a really, really fun slate of games. I think especially tonight with Tampa Bay. I mean, listen, Philly looked absolutely terrible. I think they really did collapse at the end of the year, and you could even see it early on with some of those runs from Tampa. There just wasn't life in Philly. So fun weekend, and I think it kind of sets up for a good next weekend with the rookie quarterbacks and the young with Love and Baker's story now advancing. And then you end the weekend with Mahomes and Allen. You can't really get better than that.
And I will say, too, I feel like in the AFC, the 4 best teams in the AFC are left. Like if you went through it, I mean, you could maybe make a case for Cincinnati with Burrow, but I think right now, based on what we've seen, those were the 4 best teams in the AFC. So whereas at the NFC, sure, you could say the Cowboys are up there, but ball don't lie. You know what I mean? And that's where it is now, right? So
how about this one more? So Love was the lone QB in the NFC without playoff experience. 3 in the AFC didn't. So that was Tua, Rudolph, and Stroud. So now Stroud and Love gone to the next round. So that's fun.
I mean, he might as well be a veteran, though. I mean, he's 3 years seasoned on the bench. But all right, so that was Wild Card Weekend. Let's check in with Patrick Everson from Vegas Insider to see how Sportsbook's fared in Las Vegas for Wild Card Weekend.
Hey, Gilles, thanks for having me back on the Action Network podcast. Happy to be here after this super Wild Card Weekend that went super poorly if you were the public recreational casual betting type. The public just got smashed over the course of this weekend. It started really with the first game, that Texans Browns. The public was all over the Browns, and the Texans went outright. They were taking the Browns on the spread and on the money line, even laying that little price on the money line on Cleveland. So that was a good result for the books. And then of course Sunday, the Green Bay Packers just boat racing the Dallas Cowboys. Gilles, I think you're a fan of the Cowboys, so my condolences, sir. Don't know what happened there. I was as shocked as probably everybody else was, but boy, that was the outcome that really made the books weekend. And we're talking books across the country here in Vegas, BetMGM and everybody else. It was just an absolute bloodletting for the public and a huge, huge win for the bookmakers. Nationally at BetMGM, Christian Cipollini said that was the one game this weekend we really needed. Packers outright was as good as it gets. Now, we got an even better comment from BetMGM Nevada's Scott Shelton. Now, he's only speaking to what happened in the Nevada market. But Scott Shelton, prior to BetMGM being BetMGM, it was just MGM Resort Sportsbooks here in Las Vegas. And Scott Shelton has been working here for like 2 decades plus behind the counter for either MGM Resorts or now BetMGM. And here's what he said about Sunday, primarily the Packers-Cowboys game, but the late game contributed as well. He said, Sunday was the biggest single-day win that I can recall, including Super Bowls. As good as the Packers win was, we also middled the Lions-Rams with bettors playing the Rams on the money line and the Lions -3. And remember, the Lions won by 1 point, 24-23. So the book scooped up all the Rams money line play and all the Lions spread play, along with the massive win it got from the Packers just rolling over the Dallas Cowboys. And he said that second game also somehow went under as well. It was totally on an overpath all game long. And then, much of the game, I shouldn't say all game long, but most of the game, it was very much on an over track. It slowed down late. Ultimately, the over did not get there. So they got the under as well, which they also needed in that Lions game, in the Rams-Lions game. So Scott said you put it all together, it was basically a miracle. So huge win. Like I said, I just can't, this is the thing that baffles me. It just boggles my mind. As he said, yesterday, and I'm talking to you on Monday night, so he's speaking to Sunday, was the biggest single day win that I can recall, including Super Bowls. And I know I already said that once, but I just feel it needs further emphasis because it's just stunning how well they did to that game. And a lot of other books obviously did really, really well too. But that was the comment that I got that really stood out the most on this. Now, when you're talking about Monday games, the Steelers-Bills game, that was pretty good two-way action at most books. For the most part, they probably needed the Steelers in the end because of moneyline parlays and straight bet parlays on Buffalo. So they did not get that. However, a lot of people were moneyline parlaying, if that's a term, the Bills to the Eagles. And the Eagles got upset on Monday night. Modest upset, but the Eagles, dumpster fire of late, and the the defending NFC champion is now out of the picture, losing to Tampa Bay. Well, that blew up a bunch of moneyline parlays that were running Bills to the Eagles. So yet another win for the books over the mostly public betting masses. So a good weekend for the books, not so good for the bettors. Hopefully the bettors can recalibrate and be able to come back with something for the divisional round of the playoffs. And those odds are on the board. You got 4 games. I did talk to a Vegas odds maker about all 4 of them. We'll just quickly touch on all 4 of them real quickly. Baltimore opens 9.5 against Houston. That's the first game of the weekend on Saturday. And the odds maker said this matchup is similar to Green Bay, San Francisco, which I'll get to in a moment. He said Baltimore's power rating is really high, so this is a much tougher test for CJ Stroud in Houston. He said some public bettors might get caught up in the Houston story, but he thinks Baltimore will see the bulk of the money, and they're going to need Houston come Saturday. Moving on to Saturday night, Packers against the Niners. Obviously, recency bias would normally come into play here, but it's the San Francisco 49ers you're talking about here who had a bye, while the Packers looked great against the Cowboys. But as the odds maker said, the Packers looked awesome, but San Francisco's power rating is in a different class, and we're expecting the public to still be on the Niners. So they expect to need the Packers this week. And they needed the Packers last week, though, and they got them. And as I noted a few moments ago, the Bucks blew out the Eagles to advance, but then opened as 6-point road underdogs against the Detroit Lions, who get their first playoff win in 32 years. The odds maker said this line would have opened higher than 6, but because Tampa had such a decisive wild-card victory through 32-9 over the defending NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles, he said since it was such a decisive wild-card victory for Tampa, that equals the line shaded in the Bucks' direction slightly. It could be headed it could head north. We'll see how bettors take it, especially with BetMGM. They get BetMGM Michigan takes in a ton of action, and they bet the regional bias there is tremendous. So don't be surprised if it comes in heavy at BetMGM on the lines for this week, and that line may be heading north of 6, maybe 6.5, maybe it even gets to 7. And then you got really the marquee matchup of the divisional playoff round. Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills. Recall Buffalo went to Kansas City earlier in the season and won. And these teams definitely have some great history over the past few years with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So the odds maker opened Bills -2.5, -120 this evening, noting that Buffalo's banged up defense could be an issue here. There are a lot of players hurt, and they lost another player in today's game against the Steelers. So that notwithstanding, the odds maker said these two teams have pretty similar power ratings at this point, with a slight nod to Buffalo. And Buffalo's not even getting them. And if you like to think that the home team gets a 3-point, kind of bump, for playing at home. Well, Buffalo's 2.5 minus 120. So they're not even really giving Buffalo the full 3-point edge there, so they're saying on a neutral field that this would basically be a pick'em game. So there you have it, Jill. A look at how the NFL Super Wild Card Weekend went. And again, not very well for the bettors, but hopefully they can recalibrate and come back and do better on the divisional playoff round weekend. And a look ahead to that next weekend. There's going to be some really good matchups coming up. We'll see if some of these upstarts, the Packers, the Texans, the Bucs, see if they can continue to make things interesting. Have a great week.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, and thank you for listening to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Enjoy the rest of your week, and keep an eye out for all of our NFL Divisional Round podcasts right here on the Action Network.